subscribe.
Hi everybody and welcome. My name's Alison, the online piano and the online violin tutor. Today I'm going to do a video on the pros and cons of playing the violin. So I'm just going to run through a few pros that I think are good for the violin and a few cons that I think are perhaps not so good for the violin. So this isn't going to be a negative video, this is just kind of almost giving you a heads up perhaps, or just to kind of let you know the kind of difficult things that you're going to find about the violin, but also in comparison to that all the nice things that really kind of counteract the most difficult things. So obviously learning an instrument is difficult anyway. Nobody said it isn't, nobody said it's going to be easy or anything, but I just wanted to kind of give you a general overview, and perhaps maybe some of you out there who can't get access to lessons, or don't have anybody to contact, don't have a teacher to contact, or you can't talk to another violinist, and you're sort of sitting there thinking to yourself, I'm having problems doing such and such, or holding the violin, or whatever it is. And hopefully this video will sort of help you in a way that some of the cons perhaps that I'm going to be mentioning are some of the difficulties that you're having, so that you'll know that there's absolutely nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's just part and parcel of playing the violin. So I'm going to start with the cons first. So this is in no way negative at all. This is just maybe a few drawbacks is not really the right word for it, but just a few difficulties that one might encounter when playing the violin. So first of all, I think holding the bow and the violin are quite difficult compared to, say, playing a clarinet or a flute or something, or a recorder, that kind of thing, saxophone. You just sort of stand there, put the instrument up to your mouth, and then just sort of play it, so to speak. That sounds very crude, doesn't it? But compared to those sorts of instruments, or the piano, where you just literally sit down in front of the piano, stick your hands on the keys, and off you go, everything's lovely jubbly. But with a violin, annoyingly, you have to hold it, and you can't just hold it any old how. It has to be in the right place, and lots of people have problems with how to hold it and where to hold it and all that kind of thing, and I've done loads of videos on the shoulder rest and how to hold the violin and that kind of thing. So it is awkward. It is awkward. So if you're having difficulty holding the violin, do not panic. As long as you know how to hold it in the correct way, this is something that you will just get used to doing, and that's just that. It's just like starting a new job. You don't know anybody in the office, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know which way is up and which way is down, but it's something that you gradually start to learn. And holding the bow is very awkward as well. Unfortunately, we can't just hold the bow any old how we want to. We have to hold it well, there are several bow holds. Again, I've done a recent video on this, but holding the bow is quite awkward as well. A lot of you have trouble holding the bow and saying that your little finger tends to bend and it wants to do this and it slips off and that kind of thing. That's absolutely normal. Again, as long as you know how to hold the bow correctly, and make sure that, especially as a beginner, that you really do make sure that your bow hold stays the way it should do, then everything will be okay. So those that holding the violin and holding the bow are one of the two most difficult things of the violin. Another thing that's quite tricky with the violin, or another con with the violin, is the intonation is so difficult on the violin. The guitar is full of lovely frets and everything, so you know exactly where you need to place your fingers. Rather irritatingly, someone decided that they're not going to put that on the violin, and that you've got to decide and choose and listen to exactly where your fingers go. So intonation can be a problem as well, but as long as you're aware and as long as you're listening, then everything should be okay. I would probably say that intonation is possibly the most important thing with a violin. Holding the violin and holding the bow might be awkward to start with, but it's fairly simple to overcome. Intonation is very difficult because it requires you having to listen to the notes you're playing, and sometimes my intonation isn't absolutely perfect, but I will go away and I will work on it and make sure that my intonation is perfect, so that when I'm doing performances and things, it's not going to sound off or anything. So intonation, that's another difficult thing. Okay, trying to produce a nice sound or a nice tone. So that's really involving the bow. So I always say that the fingers give you the note, A, B, C, D, E, etc., and the bow produces the sound. So generally, if you're not making a nice sound, it's not going to be with the fingers up here, it's going to be with the bow. Because until I put the bow on the string, then you're not going to get any sound out of the violin at all. If I'm just standing like this, no sound. As soon as I move the bow on the string, then you get a sound. So the sound is coming from the bow. So if there's something wrong with the sound, it's going to be coming on the bow. And I'd say the most common problem would be people probably playing too close to the bridge. The closer to the bridge you play, the scratchier it goes. So if you want to play in the middle, if you play near the bridge, so I don't like that sound, it makes my teeth go on edge, but I don't know if you can hear it scratching. That's the horrible sound that people hate the most when students are playing or beginners are playing the violin. If you're getting that sound, it's just because your bow is drifting up and down the part where you're supposed to be playing, so in between the fingerboard and the bridge. And if you're getting that scratchy sound, you're playing too close to the bridge. So just bring it back a little bit. You won't get that if you play on the fingerboard. If you play on the fingerboard, you'll just get a softer, almost no sound, if you like. So you want to be roughly in the middle, but if it's scratching, that's because you're near the bridge. Playing fast, that's another difficult issue as well, and I find that it's the coordination between the fingers and the trying to get all of this going and trying to get it all going really, really fast and everything. Sorry, I wasn't actually playing anything, I was just messing around trying to play it fast and move the bow, just so you get the idea of what I mean. So it's what happens is that you often get a delay, and that's because the bow has moved but the finger is still on the note before, so you get that almost delay, or you get the drag. I can't really demonstrate it. It's something that I've worked very, very hard to get rid of. So unfortunately, that's one of the only things that I cannot demonstrate to students when I'm saying, oh, did you know that your fingers aren't moving in exactly the same time as your bow? I can't demonstrate it because I've spent so many years trying not to do it that I can't do it. So sorry folks, I can't demonstrate that one. But what you can do to overcome that is to do very slow practice. And then gradually get faster. So you make sure that your fingers and your bow know exactly what they're doing, so that when you do get faster, there isn't a problem. But that's what you need to do. If you're playing something like Zardas, for example, it's a very famous piece of music that has a lot of silly fast stuff going on in the violin. That is something that you need to practice very slowly first. You need to practice 100 times really slowly, then knock it up a notch, do it another 100 times, knock it up a notch, another 100 times, so that you can gradually train your fingers slowly and get faster. It must be slow practice. That's the only way you're going to get rid of that A, delay, and B, you're going to be able to get your bow moving in exactly the same time as your fingers. Sometimes students say that the holding the violin and everything hurts their arm or hurts their shoulder. So when you first start to play, it hurts this part of your arm here when you're holding the violin, just because you're not used to, you know, if I said to you, hold your arm up like that in the air for an hour, it would be a little bit of a problem. It's not so bad, quite so bad when you're playing the violin. I can play the violin for a good 2-3 hours and I'm still okay. I just find that my arm just needs to I need to twist it about a bit and just relax it. So sometimes when you start to play, you'll find that this part of your arm here starts to hurt a little bit. That's absolutely fine because you're just not used to holding up an instrument. And again, with your bow arm as well, you'll find that it'll hurt a lot over here, just because you're actually having to hold your arm out in a position that it's not really used to being held out with. So as long as it's not a bad pain and you're not getting any kind of nerve twinges or anything that feels terrible, then if it's just kind of like an ache, say you've just been to the gym and you haven't been to the gym in ages, and you do all your stretching, the next day you're in agony because everything's hurting because you're using muscles that you've never used before. It's a similar sort of thing. So if it's a good pain, so to speak, and not a bad pain, then that's okay, because that's something that you'll gradually get used to. Another con with a violin, it's difficult to get good quickly on the violin, if that makes sense. So it takes a long time for you to get a nice sound out of the violin. So for me and my students, if I get a complete beginner, within the first year of them starting lessons with me, they will be on grade 1 or pretty much taking grade 1. So that kind of gives you an idea of where you should be within a year of learning. Or that's for me anyway. Sometimes it's faster than that, sometimes it's slower, but the majority of the time it's either faster or grade 1 excuse me, in a year. So unlike the piano, it's much easier to knock out a tune quite quickly. And I think it's a combination of the fact that you don't have to hold the piano and hold the bow. You don't have to worry about intonation. You don't have to worry about where your finger. There's loads of things that you don't have to worry about. So you can knock all of that straight out and just get onto the playing. So it is harder to make a nicer sound out of the violin to start with than it is, say, perhaps other instruments. I can only really speak for the piano, keyboard and organ because I don't play any brass or woodwind, but definitely compared to the piano. One last con I've come up with is tuning the violin. So you don't have to tune, well, you do have to tune other instruments obviously, but compared to, say, when clarinetists tune and flutes tune and they pull out the top bit and change it around and everything. I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody here, but I don't play the flutes. My knowledge is limited, but you can change the mouthpiece quite easily to shorten or lengthen the sound or whatever to tune up the flute. On the piano, you don't have to tune it. Technically you do, but you would get a piano tuner in to come and do that, so that wouldn't be your problem anyway. But with the violin, annoyingly, it involves pegs, the same as it does with the guitar really. The violin's probably a little bit harder because it does depend on the pegs, and I think the peg box up here is a little bit more kind of intricate than it is in a guitar. They always seem to be a lot easier to tune, I find anyway, simply because you get less resistance with the pegs. And then you've got the fine tuners down the bottom. I don't have any, I only have the E string because this violin is made for using the pegs, but I find tuning the violin quite difficult as well. Well, I don't find it difficult, but I find that, beginners seem to find it difficult because not only do you not really understand the sound of the strings just because you're starting out in your musical career, but it's very hard to know when to stop tuning and when you've hit the right sound and what sounds right and what doesn't sound right and all that kind of thing. So yeah, tuning. Okay, going on to the pros here. When you can play the violin, it is absolutely beautiful, and it is the reason why I decided to play the violin. I started with the piano first, heard the violin, thought, right, that's it, I've got to have a go at that. So if you can get to a good grade, if you can get to a grade 5-ish on the violin and you can start knocking out really decent tunes and you can start to play the violin well and you get above and beyond that, then it is absolutely beautiful, and I don't regret any of my time that I've spent learning this instrument. I absolutely love playing the violin, which is why I do it all the time now, because it's just brilliant. And even when I hear other master violinists playing on YouTube and things, I think to myself, oh, I really wish I could play the violin, and I think, yay, I can play the violin. So even now I still get that kind of the goosebump thing, and I think I really want to play the violin. And I can play the violin, and it inspires me every single time to pick up the violin, learn a new piece of music, or just, practice more. So when you can get the hang of the violin, it is beautiful. And dare I say it, but I think the violin is even more, when it's played well, I think it's even more beautiful than the piano. Dare I say that? I'm a pianist as well, so I'm allowed to say that, but I think that the violin has a nicer, sweeter tone than the piano, and I would prefer to listen to a professional violinist over a professional pianist. That's just my opinion. I don't want to offend anybody, but I am a pianist as well. But I think if I had to choose, if someone said to me, right, you can only play one instrument, it's got to be the piano or the violin, you can't play the other anymore, or we're going to take away all your skill on the other instrument, I think I would choose violin. I would choose to keep the violin and get rid of the piano if I had to do that. So yeah, when it's played well, it definitely pays off. It's very satisfying when you've accomplished something. Because the violin is so difficult, it is very satisfying when you have accomplished something, because all of a sudden, 1 minute it sounds rubbish, all of a sudden it just sounds brilliant. So you get more satisfaction, I think, out of accomplishing something on the violin than you probably, I would say, on the piano. But again, that's possibly more my opinion than maybe anything else. When you can play the violin, I always think you are highly skilled in something that not a lot of other people can do. When you think out of 1,000 people, how many people can play the violin? How many people statistically would you say can play the violin very well, as in, be able to kind of go and perform in front of other people and give a concert and that kind of thing? Probably not that very many, maybe 1, 2, I don't know, out of 1,000 people. And I'm talking not just play the violin, I'm talking, I suppose, my level and upwards, I guess, really play the violin. So I just, thank the gods every day that I can play so well. So I'm just so thankful that I have a skill that not a lot of other people have, and the same goes for the piano or any other instrument as well. And I suppose that there are many pros to playing the violin, but of course the final pro to playing the violin is that it really is beautiful if you can get a nice sound out of it. It just goes back to that, really. I think the main pro of playing the violin is that, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, it really is worth the payoff. It really is worth the time and effort of doing it. And I know you'll go through a lot of, you know, a lot of rubbish and a lot of really down times thinking, oh, I can't do it, it's not happening. But it will happen. If you stick with it, it will happen. You'll quite often find that you'll be practicing on something for ages, nothing will happen, and then you'll come back to it a couple of 3 days later and boom, you've got it. And what you did a few nights before has sunk in. You just didn't think it had sunk in. It happens to me all the time, and I get really frustrated and I just want to throw all my toys out of the pram and think, no, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm putting in all this work, not getting anywhere. Come back 3 or 4 days later, do the same bit again, boom, I've got it, no problem. And I think, yes. So it does pay off. So, you know, you will go all through that, but just go and listen to, I don't know, Yehudi Menuhin, Itzhak Perlman, David Garrett. Just go and listen to them play on YouTube or other video, you know, wherever you want to go on the internet, and you'll be inspired again by them. And if you can hear something, you know, really nice and inspiring, that, or a particular piece of music or type of piece of music that you want to play, go and listen to it, and I guarantee it will put that enthusiasm and the inspiration back in you to want to play the violin and think, yes, I want to get to that level. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. A little bit of pros and cons of the violin. I don't mean any of this to be negative in any way. It's just more of a kind of, you know, there are good points to the violin, there are bad points to the violin, there are good points and bad points to everything in everyday life. So it's not negative. This is not meant to put you on. This is meant to spur you on this video. If, you know, if it was that bad, I'd have given up long ago, but I'm not. I'm here and I'm making these videos, and I'm hoping that I'm inspiring you guys as well to continue on with your practice and trying to encourage you. Yes, it is difficult. I'm not going to lie, it is difficult, but it is so worth it, and that is the biggest pro to playing the violin. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall see you on in the next one.
Subscribe.